Welcome back to the Brilliant Fishing Podcast. Today, you're going to see a very special, different type of podcast between myself, Troy Thompson, our North Carolina Wildlife Resources District 6 biologist, and also got a third guest, Chris Miller of Mill Rock Crappie Guides. And we're going to be getting together today and talking about all sorts of things crappie fishing related. And we're going to talk about everything from aging fish to false spawns to we're going to talk about ages, lengths, stunted growth populations. We're going to talk about just everything from soup to nuts crappie fishing. I mean, we're really going to get in the weeds on this one. But what you should probably know before you begin to watch here is that this video actually is the continuation of or this podcast rather, is a continuation of the video that we made back last week. And if you haven't watched that, I'd encourage you to go watch that on YouTube. But that video was a collaborative effort between the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission and Troy Thompson, Chris Miller of Mill Rock Crappie Guides, and myself. We all worked together to go out and actually catch some huge slab crappies off of High Rock Lake. It's the northern lake on the Yadkin River chain. We went out and got some like 2-pound crappies. I think our biggest one was like 242. Brought those back home. So Chris and I went out and caught those fish January 1st. A lot of fun. Brought those fish back home, put them on ice. The next day, Troy Thompson shows up, and he helped me. And Chris couldn't be there, but Troy helped me, and we split those fish open, extracted the otoliths from those fish, and then Troy brought his equipment, and we actually looked at the otoliths under a microscope, and we actually were able to age each of those fish. So we took detailed weight, length, and age measurements we ended up doing 6 crappies that day that we aged, measured, and weighed. And so the podcast that you're about to listen to is going to begin with us all three getting back together in the same room and dissecting that data and just talking about, well, what does that mean? So anyway, I just wanted to preface the podcast that you're about to listen to with that information. Certainly you just listen to the podcast, but it might help make a little more sense if you go back and watch the video first. So at any rate, we're so glad you stopped by. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave us a comment, drop us an email. If there's something you'd like to see, you have some questions, obviously you can reach out to me, brilliantfishingnc@gmail.com, Mill Rock Crappie Guides, Chris Miller, you find him on Facebook. Also Troy Thompson of the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. We'll link his contact information in the description below. And so we're just going to go ahead and jump into that conversation. Well, we finally had the opportunity to all get together in the same room after going out and catching these ginormous crappies. And then Troy was here the next day and we aged the crappies. And, we got to thinking, what would be the coolest thing here would be for us to all get in the same room and go over the data together. And so we're going to sit here today and we're all kind of excited about this. Like, what can this data do for us? What can we, what's this going to tell us about the lifespan of the crappie? What's it going to tell us about stewarding this natural resource that we have? What's going to make High Rock a better fishery? Should we be throwing fish back? Should we not be throwing fish back? What do these otoliths tell us about growth rates? I mean, we got a lot of stuff to cover today, and it's just cool to have all of us here together in the same room today to do it. So I'm excited. This is gonna be cool. So let's just look at our data. I think I gave everybody one of these, and I'll put this on the screen too so you can see it at home. But we weighed 4 big black crappies, and we also did a couple of whites. We weighed them, we measured them, we extracted the otoliths, and we came up with 2 of these big fish being 10 years old, which is just unbelievable. 10 years old. And so but what I thought was equally as interesting was that there were 2 fish that we had that were right at 2 pounds that were half that old. And so that is totally not what I think any of us were expecting. So what do you guys think about that?
I'll tell you what I think.
What?
So those two fish may have come from a different part of the lake.
Okay.
And shot up in there somehow and survived and ate. Mm-hmm. Or it could have been, did we have a lot of flooding that year? Uh-huh. Did we have, a lot of something that just really fertilized that area? And when those fish were born, they ate really good.
Okay.
And they were able to grow faster than the two older crappie that were 10 years old and that were 2.5 pounds apiece. So I don't know. Doc, what do you think?
Yep.
I think the 5-year-olds that's pretty much what I would have expected.
Yeah.
Just looking at the links, when we came in, you told me what you had, and I thought there'll be 4, 5, or 6, maybe 7 years old. So seeing those 10-year-olds kind of opened my eyes a little bit. I wasn't expecting that. How that came to be, I don't really know. Did y'all catch both of those in the same? I wonder if they were kind of swimming in the same area. They seem like they hang out at times.
I'd say we caught all of those big ones within probably 50 yards of each other.
Okay, I got you.
I mean, these were in a small area, probably.
I think one might have come off some brush.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
there.
maybe one of them did. So I mean, I was wondering if, I don't know, it's just anything could be possible, I guess, but like, we had the 5-year-old fish, which were just almost 2 pounds, and then we had these two that were like 10 years old, that were just a little more than that. I mean, is it possible that they grew real fast, like for the first 5 years, and then they just very little growth, like year 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or? Well, I guess that brings up the question, when we do extract an otolith and we put it under the scope and we're seeing these rings, what all data does that give us? Is it just like age, or is there more to it than that?
There's a little more to it, and that's a great question. We talked a lot about growth last time, but there's more that we can get just from this age data. With you have links, we can get an idea of recruitment, which is how many fish survive to be catchable, so basically a year old. And we can also, if you track them over time, the different age classes, you can get estimates of mortality, so you can figure out how fast they're dying. And a lot of times with crappies, they have pretty high mortality rates, 50 to 75% a year. So if we caught 200 fish and 50% mortality, the next year, that same year class, we would expect to catch 50. Did I say 200?
Yeah.
That's bad math then. 100.
I know what you're.
I should have said 100. I'm going to give you some work to do with that, and I feel like.
That's okay.
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 So
okay, go ahead.
50% a year. Okay.
And a lot of times it's 75%.
Man.
That's the
Okay.
So.
Are you counting if they're being cannibalized, or if another fish is eating them or something, or?
Okay, so mortality includes natural mortality, and then fishing mortality.
Okay.
That makes total mortality. And there was a study that looked at dozens of surveys throughout the South, and the average was about 75% mortality. So anywhere from 50 to 90% per year is common.
Okay. Wow, so the fish to make it to 10 is like a statistical oddity.
It's pretty wild.
And how many eggs does a crappie lay in one spawn?
I don't know. It depends.
I mean, I've always
I've heard of them
10,000 to 50,000. I don't know.
I've heard of the female moving around some too.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it depends on the size of the fish. But I have some of our data.
Yeah, let's take
I put this data together from some of our big data set we have from High Rock, and it goes back to the year 2000. But it'll kind of illustrate a little bit, and it's a very small little tidbit, but kind of illustrate what we can get with age data. And if you look down at, you can see this is the number of age 2 crappies we collect since 2003. And if you notice the number,
Wow.
and then go over and look at the average length,
Interesting.
you can see that the fewer fish we catch, the bigger they are. So that shows you the density dependent growth. When there's more of them, they're competing with each other. Now this is just a snapshot because they're also competing with the year class above them,
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Like it,
below them.
I mean, it looks like, I mean, from 2003 to 2022, so that's almost 20 years. I mean, the average length is almost, I mean, it's over 3.5 inches bigger.
And what year did we come up with the no limit, no size, no creel? What was that?
That was 2015.
2015.
So 2015 was the, okay.
Yeah, you can make a line there.
And
Wow.
and it's really.
Of course, this 2016 year class was born before then. They're from 2014, if you think about it.
Mhm.
Now, all this to say, I'm not going to give that much credence to the length limit
Yeah.
changing this,
Yeah.
Okay.
but they were obviously, these are big year classes. This is a lot of fish at age 2 compared to most of the Piedmont. So they were pretty much stunted.
Are these fish collected in the same areas of the lake?
Yes.
Same
Same
spot
time,
each year.
same amount of effort.
Okay.
Everything's consistent.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that way it's apples to apples.
Right.
Makes sense.
And if you look down, so that's, if you look down at 2022, we only caught 5. So that's
In the same spot, the same time.
48 net nights, or maybe,
So
that could be less. Which sometimes we do 3 nights at High Rock. You know, you can
So-
hit that out.
So the fact that there were 5 in there, is that just that there weren't? I mean,
So
how'd
that-
reflect in your
yeah.
overall number of crappie that you caught? Did you just get a lot from other year classes?
So what that indicates is that was basically a failed year class.
Oh,
They just didn't have a good spawn at all that spring.
really.
It has nothing to do with the time, temperature.
Oh,
if it
yeah.
was cold fronts before. If it was
All that's got to do with it.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause
This
I
is
mean-
this is the end result of whatever happened
Okay.
in 2020.
Yeah.
By 2022, we only collect 5 fish from that year class, so it was a very poor spawn.
But they're big.
Yeah, they're going like gangbusters.
Really?
But
So these,
see, we would have never known that without age data to tie it back into the Otolith. We wouldn't know they were from that year.
Yes.
We wouldn't know that was
Right.
that was a
Yes.
failed spawn.
Yes.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
So what would be a failed spawn? Would that be, a flooding or what do you classify a failed spawn? By what you catch?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
the
what
proof's in the pudding.
Okay. And what would cause a failed spawn?
Any number of environmental factors. There's a lot of them. You
Okay.
named most of them.
Yeah, I know. That's
If the
what I was
water
thinking.
turns cold,
Yeah. It cuts
Yeah.
them off. They won't
Yeah.
spawn or
Okay.
there's a lot of things that can influence that.
That is
Let's
interesting.
see.
that makes perfect sense now.
So we talked about growth, and we talked about
So what
failed. So that's good data we get from Otolith.
and what creates the odorless? What is you said calcium, you said deposits, minerals. How is this thing growing? What is making this thing grow? Is something they feed on, of course, or is it a part of who knows what? I mean, eating more bait, eating more crawfish, brim. What makes this guy grow?
It's a natural phenomenon. It's calcium carbonate and protein, and more or less Otolith growth is proportionate to fish growth in length.
Okay.
Okay.
So we can actually use that data. And the researchers have done this where they didn't have a large sample size. If it's a rare fish, you can back calculate mean length at age. So you could take a 6-year-old fish and get 6 mean lengths. And what you do is measure from the very center kernel of the otolith, right? The middle of where it starts.
Right.
And you can measure the length out to the
Right.
first annulus, the second.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
you can set up a proportion between that and the mean length.
Okay.
There's formulas to do that.
And so you could sort of,
So you can get
kind of get,
data for every
you could,
year.
You could say back when this fish was 2 years old, it was probably this big, or back when it was 3 years old, it was this big.
Right, you could estimate the length.
That's pretty cool.
Which we don't really have to do because we usually catch enough fish.
Yeah.
But it's something neat that you can get from the rings, measuring that gap. And another thing, looking at them under the scope, you can tell when they've had a bad year.
Okay.
Because the margin will be smaller.
Right.
And it's typical that 1, 2, 3, the first 3 years are pretty big margins, and then they taper off smaller. And then they reach a certain point, and it's just pretty much the same growth, at least by the otolith. So that's one of the problems with back calculating is when the fish is old and growth is slow, fish might not be growing at all, but the otolith will still grow a little bit.
So it's not
it's not perfect.
Yeah.
And it could be a food source too.
Yeah.
So if it's cold in the back of a creek or something like that, I mean, if the food are not there and they're not going to travel far to find it, then they're going to grow a little slower there.
Yeah.
That could be,
And if the fish has a really bad year, maybe it got wounded or had a bad release, something that affected it, it'll show up on that otolith. And sometimes I'll see, like age 3 to 4, it'll be really tight. And then it picks back up after to normal amount, and I realized then that fish had a bad year that year.
And we should have marked that 214 that had the chunk taken out of it, and we could have looked at the otolith and said, whoa, these 2 years is much as when the bird got a hold of them or something. So I don't know.
You never know.
you never know.
And sometimes I'll see multiple fish that'll have a short increment there at the same age, and I'll know it was more than just that one fish. It was something going on environmentally.
Exactly.
Well, circling back to the question Chris was asking, I think one thing that maybe you were asking and I was wondering was, in addition to the otolith giving us age and growth rates, does the composition or colors or structure of it in any way tell us what that fish was feeding on, like what type of forage or whatever?
Of the otolith? Not that I know of.
Really? Okay.
They do have different chemical compositions.
Okay.
I'll give you one example. This was in Virginia. Somebody claimed they caught the state record striped bass for inland waters, Smith Mountain Lake, Virginia. It's a well-known striper fishery.
Sure.
But the biologist had reason to suspect this wasn't a legit fish. It didn't look right. So you can get the otolith analyzed for the chemicals composition, and strontium is a main component of that, and it's more in saltwater, like the sea run stripers. And it was real hot for strontium, and they knew
that fish was
and they found out and kind of asked the guy, and turned out he'd caught it off the Jersey Shore or something. It was like a 60-pound striped bass. So, yeah.
Well, that's just wanted his name in the record books, huh?
Busted.
It happens more than you would think. I don't know why people would want a record they didn't earn, but
I do got some questions to ask at the end now that you bring that up.
Write them down.
Well, I think the next thing I had on my list, I was going to just kind of throw in here for consideration in the mix was, so after you were here and we took the otoliths out and kind of did that, I went back and filleted these fish, which we've been eating them for a while now, and they have been delicious. But as I was cleaning them, I noticed most of these fish were slap full of eggs.
Yeah.
All the big ones, the 4 big ones, they all had like big egg sacs in them. So is that normal for this time of year, or does that surprise?
I would ask.
What do you think?
How much do you see that very often?
I see it a lot.
Okay.
I see it a lot, and I think if you've got those big egg sacs in those fish right now.
And just for the record, we caught these on January 1st. Okay.
Yeah. So I've caught and cleaned fish practically my whole life, and there is some times where I'll catch some fish this time of year, and it has just a little bitty egg sac in it, just about as big as your thumb.
Sure.
And I believe that fish did spawn in the spring, could be a late spawn.
Okay.
And then it just hasn't really grown back to where it needed to be until this coming spring, as the waters warm up and she starts to feed more. I think that egg sac will grow, and then she'll be able to spawn this spring. But in some instances, I really believe that these fish that are early right now, that look like they have a bunch of eggs in them, they may have not spawned, or they may spawn here very soon, and it could have happened, I don't know, 30 days ago. And sometimes they just wasn't enough males there, so they were just sitting there, not spawned, and then they'll just wait till this spring and try to spawn again. So I see both. I see both.
Okay.
And I haven't done any kind of scientific research to tell us, but I don't know exactly why they do it.
Are you saying you think maybe these fish with the big egg sacs had a spawning failure in the spring, past spring?
Yep.
That's something what I've been reading.
Yep.
And that's kind of plays into what I was thinking too.
I think sometimes the environmental impact that happened that spring, or they just wasn't enough males around, they didn't get to spawn, so they could have held off.
Really?
And y'all know, you see crappies, sometimes they'll bunch up this late fall or early winter, and sometimes I think they possibly could spawn right then. So then you won't see any eggs, or you'll see a small amount of eggs as you clean it, like, man, what in the world's going on there? So it just depends. I don't know. I can't tell you exactly because I'm not the
that's interesting.
The researcher. But
I appreciate you sending me those pictures, and they were illuminating to me.
Really?
Because I've been thinking about this since we went back to Baden. This topic has been on my mind. And this was early December.
What'd you see at Baden?
We caught several up to 16 inches. Biggest one I've seen in our nets, but that was a 5-year-old fish just to...
Wow, okay.
But anyway, I digress. Visually from the outside, this fish looked like it was ready to spawn. The urogenital port, the vent area was swollen and red. And I thought, dang. So I checked it out. And it was full of eggs. And I read more about it. When they're really ready to go, they get more vascular. The veins get larger in it because they're feeding the eggs and they're growing. And those pictures you sent me, they look like they were ready. They're spawn within a week.
I went back and looked at the video that we took when we were cleaning them, and I noticed as you were holding like those big ones up, you could see their vent was just like you described. And I didn't think to look at that when we were cleaning them, but when I went back and looked, I was like, oh yeah.
I did the same thing. So this phenomenon's known as a false spawn, and I guess it happens intermittently all throughout the south and up into the north. But I'll tell you this, the fish don't know it's a false spawn. They're just feeding off the environmental cues, and their hormones are turning on. They don't. Sense. So
that's the perfect word for it right there, false spawn.
Well, if they're really going off of water temperature, length of the day, those type of things, I mean, those would happen maybe more than one period during the year. So,
and plus with fish, just a quarter or a tenth of the degree in water is big for them. To us, it's not, but to them, they're living in super cold water, and super sometimes warm water, but to them, it can make a big impact.
Right.
So, they're cold-blooded, the last time I remember. And but it could make a big impact when they do and don't spawn.
Now, a lot of folks will say they can't spawn in the fall. It's a false spawn. It's not possible. But some more food for thought. In Florida, the fish. So crappies will spawn between the mid 50s and mid 60s temperature Fahrenheit, and in Florida I keep saying Florida, but around here, in the spring the waters are warming up. When they spawn in the spring. In Florida, they pretty much spawn in the coldest part of the year. So they're catching the water temperatures decreasing really, and maybe it stabilizes, and they'll spawn in January. So I don't think it's critical that the water has to be increasing in temperature.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of with you that I think it's potentially possible that
Yeah.
a few fish might spawn. I don't think it's very many, but I think it's possible for a crappie to spawn in the fall. And, the conditions have to be just right. And then, the fish that do spawn, the larvae have a kind of tougher row to hoe to make it through the winter into the spring. But I think it's possible that a few spawn and a few survive. It'd be pretty tough for us to get a handle on or to catch them in the act, because I think the numbers would be so low. We can do larval trawls. That's something that can be done to catch larval fish, but I think you'd almost be looking for a needle in a haystack as far as how many of these larval crappies would be out there. And one final note, there was one instance that fall spawning was actually documented, and that was in Florida, North Florida, on Orange Lake, right outside of Gainesville, Florida, anyway. And they typically spawn in January, but this particular year they spawn in October, like the first 2 weeks of October.
Really?
And I think the FWC in Florida does fall trawling sometimes, and they must have caught some. But anyway, they extracted Otolith, and the fish were so small they could count daily rings.
Wow.
Oh,
So that's how they knew that they'd spawn in October.
Interesting.
That makes sense.
And
crazy.
just to put maybe a fine point on it, our data, it's a very small percent, but not every, but some of our samples, I'll get a handful of Otoliths out of the whole sample that have a very small, they didn't grow much at all before the first annulus, like half the size of what I would normally expect. So much so that I fear that it's a false annulus, right? Because it's so small.
Yeah.
And I'll crack it and it's actually a year.
Really?
So I'm wondering if a fish did hypothetically spawn in the fall.
That's right.
It wouldn't grow much before because they laid annulus in the spring.
Okay.
So it's possible that Otolith is actually telling me that maybe this fish was spawned in the fall.
I mean, it's difficult to prove, but it sounds reasonable.
Right. It's an interesting thing. I'll keep looking into it, but odds are it'd be a very minute part of the fishery.
I mean, I'm just wondering, too, sometimes we have, in the last couple of years, we've had a couple of relatively mild winters.
Right.
And so maybe the conditions were a little more suitable for a larval fish to make it. Like it didn't, maybe it was a little easier for it to survive and find food. And
Yep.
So
I think that's very true and very possible. And probably just on certain years, the conditions are right. Yes, it's very interesting to me.
Yeah, it sounds
And so that was really cool. And if you could show the audience the egg in one of those pictures, it looked like
the photo.
it looked like they were within a week or a day. At least the second one you sent me, it was ready to go.
Ready to pop.
That brings up, I don't know if y'all seen the show that Ralphie PR puts on, or RP, excuse me, but Ralphie was in a cove, was in a pocket, and there was just thousands of fish bunched up, and anywhere from, looked like a yearling to, I think he caught a 250 back there.
Oh, wow.
So, and this is in the back of a pocket, off Main Lake.
I'm going to need the GPS pin.
Oh, yeah. Everybody knows it's in Abbott's, but there is a spot back there where they were just slam packed full.
Right.
And to me, the water temp, it just could be the clarity. It's right off the river channel, and they all gang back there, and it's just, they're piled in there. You could almost walk across the top of the water. So many fish in there, and that tells me, could it possibly be spawning? could they possibly be spawning back there? So
That's a good question.
I've been around enough to know that nature finds a way, and not everything's set in stone. Now, we manage fish based on the average,
Yes,
the hypothetical.
Sure.
There's a lot of variation in these fish.
And as technology changes, I'm sure this is the first time you've got to age some fish that were selected. We selected these fish. They were roaming. They weren't on structure. I'm sure in the past we didn't know much about their roaming habits. I know some old timers remember catching fish when they're tight lining or long lining. These fish are high in the water column. Why? Because they caught them that high. They knew they were that high. And so now we're getting to see the fish in action with the live scope.
Yeah.
And we're getting a little bit more information moving forward now that the technology's there. Because this is the first time I'm sure anyone's probably ever caught some roaming fish this time of year and let someone age these fish. So, kind of weird. I don't know.
It'd be a little different, I'm
thought.
sure, than what you're normally, what you're going for. We're going for sort of some outliers in the population.
Why did these fish roam? Why did they come off the brush? Why did they come off structure in dead middle of the winter and just sit there? What? I can't.
So you're
explain
saying
it.
these fish that you're able to target now would have been more difficult for somebody to target before the live scope?
Yeah, to me, if the average fisherman went out there, he wouldn't know out in the middle of the lake there would be a 2.5 pounder sitting there.
Yeah.
Until now, the last 7-8 years, this technology come out. It's really took off 5 years ago, and now who would have thought out in the middle of the lake that you would catch a fish that's suspended 4 foot under the surface in 20 foot of water, and just it's a 2.5, 3 pounder.
Yeah.
So we didn't really know that years ago. The biology can probably tell us more later on, but we didn't know these fish were there years ago. Now they might, like I said, there was some old timers caught them, but now everybody knows these fish are on these main river channels or out in the middle of a pocket, way in the back. Why would that fish be there? So the technology is starting to show us some more detail.
Yeah, it really is.
Interesting.
I was just thinking, looking back, and I was just looking at the statistical, the data sheet you gave us for the age 2 black crappies. So I was just thinking, moving back, our 10-year-old fish that we had, our big whoppers. So if we're catching them 2024, so these are 20, help me with the math here, 2014, they were born in 2014? Okay. 2014 is not on this list, but I don't know if we looked at 2014 like it was at a good year class, or was there a study done that year? Or? So I guess they would have been age 2. That would have been the 2016 class. The 2016 2-year-olds, right?
Yeah. So I was going to get onto that.
Okay. Well, you take us there because I'm not sure I'm saying it right. Well, I was just thinking the fish we pulled that we got, they were the 10-year-olds.
Yeah.
So they were part of which year class, I guess. Would have been the ones that was on the sheet that said they were 2 years old in 2016, right?
Yeah, it's
Which
right
is
there.
the one you have in bold.
Yeah, that's why I bolded.
Okay, and that's why you bolded it. Okay,
Yeah.
so that was actually a pretty healthy year class. There were a lot of 2-year-old fish that year.
Yeah.
So these fish, I think I'm saying this right. So these fish would have been part of a large recruitment year,
Yeah.
and somehow they made it through. Obviously not dying. Right? They made it through not dying, but they also made it through the 75% cut the first year, and then another 75, 50 or 75 the next year, and the next year, and the next year. So these fish really, to be 10 years old, looking at the data, these fish are almost like a miracle in some ways, but Yeah, I don't know where I'm headed with that, but it just
I'll tell you where I'll take it.
take it.
So, this is the big question. And I think a lot of anglers out there want to know, moving forward, you know, will there be a day that you have to throw a 2-pounder back? Will there be a day, no, you have to keep a 2-pounder? Should you throw them back? Should you keep them? What's going to be the best conservation moving forward for my grandson Asher? You know, I just got him his lifetime license. You want to make sure he catches a 3-pounder.
Oh yeah.
You know, so what, in your opinion, what's it going to take to protect High Rock, Baden, Tuckertown, Tillery, Blewett Falls to make sure that we're still catching fish like this?
Well, I think the data was interesting that we collected, y'all collected. That shows that some of these fish can get to be 10 years old and not be stunted, which was surprising to me. So if you look at this chart or graph, I guess it's a chart here. So the question is, how did they live that long? That's what was amazing to me, because you'd think that they would be harvested before they got to be 10 years old.
Some kind of mortality, you know?
Yeah.
Like either natural or fishing. So on one hand, that makes me feel not too bad about harvesting them, because it just seems that they're not being, at least these fish, over harvest wasn't a concern. Because if it was really getting fished that hard, you would think, well, how would you get a 10-year-old fish then? It's obviously been swimming around
all these years.
at a perfectly catchable size.
Sure.
So, yeah, that was something that's interesting.
Well, it's the reason why he got the 2 pounds.
Right.
You know, he was never caught.
So these fish can live to a ripe old age under the certain conditions. But
fishing pressure is just one of those conditions.
Yeah.
I mean, not okay.
And if you compare them, so as a biologist, I would compare them to the population at large. And what's really becoming impressive to me is, the more I've been doing this, is how much variation there is amongst individual crappies. Because on one hand, you have fish that are stunted out. They're 8 inches long and 8 years old. And at the same time, even though conditions have improved, they're still stunted. And there's younger fish than them that are growing past them, while these fish remain stunted. And on the other side, you have fish that are just growing at a normal rate and not getting caught or not surviving longer, but they're growing decently, not phenomenally. And on top of that, you have the fish that are trying to spawn in the fall. There's just a lot of variation in crappies that I'm really starting to respect. But so talking about these 10-year-olds, I'm just amazed that they lived that long.
That we kept a 2-pounder, but would it help that we threw the 2-pounder back? You know, I'm going to use some logical sense. Would that 2-pounder ever get caught again? I don't know.
That's a good question.
You know, but at least there would be a chance if he was thrown back. So, you know, in my opinion, I mean, you know, I was always, now that we're able to catch and target bigger fish, and, you know, I would like to practice and to help promote, hey, you know, it's okay to catch fish from a pound to a pound and a half, you know, maybe even 2 pounds. But once they get to that 2/4, 250, 3 pound range, you know, practice catch and release, I don't know. You know, should we keep that fish? I don't know. But let's just say if you did throw a 2-pounder back, there is a chance that he could become a 3-pounder. And and he could be caught again. So I don't know.
You know,
Like what I was just noticing, and we have just a real small data set here, which
Yeah.
like we've got 4 2-pound fish, roughly, and 2 of them are old, like 10 years old. 2 of them are like 5 years old, and so like I don't know if that's sort of characteristic of the rest of the population, but if half of the 2-pounders are geriatric, and then half are still got a pretty good life left ahead of them. Like that tells me like it's like maybe a 50-50 chance. Like you catch a 2-pound fish, it might be young, it could grow up to be a ginormous fish, or like okay, it could be about the end of its life, and you might as well keep it anyway. So like, so I don't know. I mean, I guess we collected very few, but I could see there being a argument for if it's under 2, if you want to keep it needed. But like I could also see like if it's 2 pounds. Like I could put that back, and chances are good in another year, like it could be 250, 275, and it'd be really cool if somebody caught it.
I mean, who practiced the catch and release with bass? Who started that? Was it Ray Scott? Was it the BASS? Was it the biologist? Why did they start doing it then? Catch and release, conservation, maybe catching a bigger fish down the road. Bass was popular. But I remember the days of seeing Roland Martin and all those old timers. Just they had stringers full of fish, and it seems like it didn't hurt it then. Would it hurt it now? I don't know.
That's a good question.
kind of depends on harvest. So let's look at this. This will tie in. So, like you had mentioned earlier. 6 fish really doesn't tell you. We couldn't really use it, because it's not representative. We don't know. So, but it does show that some fish get old.
It does.
And if you look at that chart or this table here, it's what the part that I highlighted. Those 10-year-old fish were born in 2014. So in 2016, we collected their brothers and sisters to the tune of 364 fish. So that was a tremendous year class. So when you produce that many fish, then it kind of starts making sense now that you can see them 10 years later. Because there was just that much output at the time. So this was a really big year class. And they're fairly stunted at the time at age 2. Not horrible, but pretty small. So these 2 fish managed to overcome the stunting, and they did pretty well. They did pretty well.
Interesting.
But the fact that they swam around for 10 years. So if I caught one, I'm kind of like, I would kind of feel bad that I harvested a 10-year-old fish on one hand, just because just out of respect.
That's how.
Right.
Just respect. But then when I put my biologist hat and think about it biologically, I'm thinking, well, dang, I would have thought this fish wouldn't have survived this long. So that makes me feel better about harvest, and that I don't think the fishery's being over harvested. So then, if you think big picture about releasing bigger fish, right? Think about it this way, though. So if you're releasing these old fish that are, truthfully, to be 10 years old, that's not very tremendous growth. You want to put the best genetics back in the lake, but there's no way to tell. So you might be promoting old fish that I'm wondering are savvy and don't really bite very well. You have to be you're a good angler to catch them, right? So you're putting old closed mouth fish back that are not growing super tremendously fast when they're other fish in there that are the same size and only 5 years old. So if you think about all that, I come to the conclusion that it's an individual choice, and people should do what makes them feel the best.
Yeah.
But I don't really see any signs now that harvesting 2-pound fish is bad. But I also think it's fine if people release them. It's a good thing.
It's probably just individual choice, and so like if I could definitely see there being a benefit from an angling perspective to put back the 2-pound ones, because if you put it back, well, let me say it this way: if you don't put it back, somebody's not going to catch it. And by that point, by the time they get that big, it's not like taking them out helps the rest of the population, because the time they get that big, they're eating fish, and like there's no shortage of bait. But like what really makes them stunt, according to what you were saying, was when they sort of hit that bottleneck. They're trying to live on the zooplankton, and they can't ever bust out of that to start eating fish. So like, but once they start eating fish, like the sky's the limit. I
Pretty
mean,
much.
it's until they either just die from old age or something eats them. Like, I mean, they could just keep going. But like, anyway, I guess all that to say, like, if you put a 2-pound crappie back, as long as he would live, like, he'd have plenty of food.
Right.
Could get bigger.
Well, the good thing I see is we've got the right biologist on staff. Our lakes, our High Rock and our other lakes, things are going in the right direction. And I've seen more 3-4 pound fish caught in the last couple months. And so we're on the right track.
Yeah. I can't take credit for that, but I appreciate the offer though. But think about this. I don't think there's that many really old crappies out there. But typically big crappies don't last that long. So you kind of wonder, especially with a 10-year-old, if you throw him back, how much longer is it going? How much longer would its natural lifespan even be at 10 years old and 2+ pounds? But the 5-pounders that are not 5-pounders, 5-year-old fish that are caught, maybe they were more likely to bite. But I don't know. I just wonder how much longer they would survive with the mortality rates. Yeah.
Well, if you want to go out and do another study, let me know. I'll take you fishing. We'll go catch some fish, have a good time, and do some more studies on some different lakes, or even the same lake. Maybe fish a whole another part of the lake and see what those studies tell us. So it was a great trip. I know that.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed every facet.
And you did have some data that I don't usually see. I wish we could get a lot more. But then again, I have to hack them to get ages.
You do,
Maybe we don't take but so many of them. But it was nice to see that the fish can live that old and be healthy and good sized.
Yeah, for sure. Seemed to me like we had some other questions. I'm trying to remember what they were. I know we covered the false spawning, covered the age classes, the growth rates. Seemed to me like there was something else I wanted to cover with that.
I do have one question. A hybrid crappie. Can you tell us how a hybrid crappie is born? What happens? What produces a hybrid crappie? I kind of have an idea, but I mean, what is the correct way a hybrid crappie is?
It's simply a black and white.
Okay.
So
cross. What?
Because hybrids usually don't reproduce very well themselves. So it's not like there's a gang of hybrid crappies that are finding each other and mating and carrying their line. They're usually not
first generation.
F1s they would call it.
So the hybrid cannot continue to reproduce.
They probably can, but they're not very.
Successful.
They're not very fertile.
Okay.
Yeah.
So does that? And I'm just I'm skinning my ignorance here, but what I've heard is that okay? So a particular body of water, these crappie are spawning somewhat at different times. Like blacks are going to spawn before whites. So like I would think that it would be chronologically difficult, I guess, for there to be that? Like, because you basically got to have the females moving up to lay the eggs. You got to have the males coming up to fertilize the eggs at the same time. And these fish doing different things at different temperatures. So, I mean, is this, like, how rare is this, I guess? Or what has to be in place for that to happen?
That's pretty rare.
Okay.
I've seen them on occasion during my career. I've seen them mostly at High Rock.
Yes.
And it might just be a function of there's just that many fish spawning in this similar area at similar time. But at least one year, I think, and they're kind of hard to tell, so I might have missed some, but I probably saw 30 some that were obviously hybrid to me out of, I don't know, 300 or 400 fish.
Wow.
So it happens.
Oh, yeah.
Same thing, I guess we're talking about variety of crappies and the individuality and things that they do and things that can happen. And hybrid crappie's another one.
So have you haven't seen the hybrid, or you haven't noticed them on other lakes in our chain, just on High Rock?
Just not enough to really register. I've seen them on other, but very incidental, where, you know, every now and then you look at one and he looks weird. He looks like it could be a hybrid.
It looks a little weird,
And they are, I mean, it's pretty tough to tell visually with any kind of certainty.
Right. But,
Well, I do want
but
to.
that's okay.
I do want to further this, you know, one day. Maybe go to another lake, catch some bigger fish, or, you know, maybe get a different time of year, catch some fish.
I'm interested.
You know, there's some more I want to do going forward now that, you know, we got a relationship with you, Troy, and, you know, if there's some more detailed fish catching or, you know, more intel that you need from us, you know, you've got, I mean, I got some great anglers.
You might be helpful for our fall sampling. Just based on this year, we had a horrible year.
Really?
And I'm thinking, man, if I knew a guy that knew where the fish were, maybe he could have told me, well, you're wasting your time at baiting this week. You know, but,
well, I know a lot of fishing buddies.
I can tell you where not to be.
Yeah, I mean, if the fish ain't
I'm
moving.
good at that.
I know a lot of fishing buddies, and we can get you on some fish. And if you need help catching some fish, we would be more than happy to put a posse together and bring you some people to catch some fish. So
it will be fun.
Maybe I need to say, just to give you a little bit more.
Okay.
So we talked about these individual fish and the diversity of the crappies, but as biologists, we go on by the main population. We pretty much we have to shoot for what everybody's catching, and that's typically 1, 2, and 3-year-old fish that they comprise the vast majority of the population. So that's what we have to manage for.
Right. So you're managing the general population.
The general population.
Not the outliers, which is kind of funny because, you know, like we really as anglers, that's the ones we want are the outliers. Well, tournament angling, you want the outliers. You want those that are at the complete like far end of the what do they call it, statistics, the standard deviation. The ones that's way off.
They're in the tail end of the bell curve.
Tail end of the bell curve, right. So,
exactly.
That 99th percentile, you know, big, you know,
But it all interests me, so I like just the learning about the life history of even the stunted ones and comparing it. So,
Well, I think, I mean, there's probably an argument to be made too that, you know, if you're concerned about the health of the ones living in the middle of the bell curve, I mean, the whole thing, I mean, they're all interrelated. So if you're really dealing with, okay, this is what keeps the general population healthy, chances are, I mean, you're going to have more of them that are up here on the end of the bell curve.
Exactly.
Out of all these years, other than, you know, this year, or 20, between 25, we caught them fish. It was the first day of the year.
It was,
I forgot. Out of all these years of collecting, how many 10-year-old fish have ever been caught in a gill trap?
20.
Wow.
20 maybe?
That's fascinating.
So very few in a
Well, our oldest one, I think our record was 12 from Otolith.
Okay.
And
And that was a stunted fish.
right, that's the difference.
Yeah, yeah,
All of them, I don't think I've ever. So here, that's an interesting point. So I don't think that we've seen a big fish, 15 plus inches, that was over age 7. So, yeah.
So what does that tell us? What does that? How should I put this? Well, obviously we.
Well, you can just leave it right there. What does it tell us?
Yeah.
So as a biologist, just 2 fish really doesn't tell us much for the population, but it
Yes.
does tell us that some fish
Yeah.
can hang on and live that long and eat and not be stunted.
Yeah. Yeah,
It tells us it's possible.
Yeah, exactly. It raises the possibility. It doesn't
Right.
Well, that makes me happy that even just through the trials of catching fish with gill trap, that there's 10-year-old fish out there. So even not picking out and harvesting like what we're doing now is any different than what they were doing in the gill trap. So it hadn't affected the population any.
Right.
I don't think. If anything, it's helped.
maybe, yeah.
It's helped to me.
I mean,
That's the goal. And if you look at the growth,
Yeah.
you can obviously see when there's fewer crappies, they grow much faster.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
on one hand, I like to promote harvest,
Yes.
especially at High Rock.
Oh yeah.
Now, when I'm saying unless I'm hoping people will keep 8 inchers,
Yeah.
which
well,
because
yeah,
that's the most numerous.
well,
Take
not-
those out.
yeah, if they're not keeping them off the front end of the bottleneck,
Yeah.
it really doesn't help.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well,
But the bottleneck seems to be gone for the time being at High Rock. Not to say it won't come back next year.
Yeah.
I mean, and it sounds bad to say, but I almost think as anglers, the years where they have a quote unquote failed recruitment are actually really good for us as far as for having larger fish to catch. I mean, failed recruitment years, I mean we're looking, the average size of these fish is huge.
Yeah.
Yep.
Comparatively speaking, like here's these two-year-old fish that are almost 11 inches long. I mean, those are eaters right there. Those are fun to catch.
So why did they have before 2000? What was it? 15.
Mm-hmm.
Why was it 8-inch limit? Why was it only 20 fish? What was
I
the
think
reason
they
for
did
it?
that in 1991, and I believe it was kind of piggybacking off the Ray Scott, the bass thing, and well, it worked for bass.
Okay.
That was the thinking at the time. Let's try it on crappies,
Okay.
and
yeah,
I don't think crappies are very well suited for that kind of regulation,
Yes,
but
yes.
they threw it out there, and I don't think it did a whole lot.
Well, you were saying something. I think it was just you and I talking. I don't think we recorded it in part of the podcast, but one of the things that you and I had talking about was the whole, like, how to phrase it. When you put a regulation like that on, like a size or creel limit, the only way that that's effective is, how do you say that? If it impacts. If it actually impacts harvest, or I forget how you phrase that.
So the regulation has to change something that an angler wanted to do, right? It has,
Yeah. That's how you
it
say
has to
it,
change something. It has to
Explain
protect.
that to us if you don't mind, because I think that's important. I think a lot of people don't understand how that works.
So this 8-inch limit is a great example of it. So the regulation has to force the angler's behavior to change from something that they were wanting to do. So imagine an 8-inch limit, and if nobody was keeping fish less than 8 inches, what does the regulation do? Their behavior wouldn't be changed at all by putting that limit on.
Like if I didn't want to keep an 8-inch crappie anyway,
Right.
like I only keep them if they're 10 or bigger. Really, that regulation had no impact on how many I was taking out.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And a creel limit. So here, I heard somebody make this argument, and this was an angler was making this argument. They took off the creel limit of 20 per day per person, and they think that people now that has impacted angler habits. Like they took off the creel limit of 20, and now people are keeping 100. And I don't know if that's true or not, but
I wonder that one has a little more credence, I would say, than the length one. But I also kind of wonder, a lot of angler concerns are more based on valid worries. They're worried, and they can imagine somebody taking a cooler full of fish out, but I wonder how much that actually happens.
A lot of that's maybe anecdotal. It's just sort of like, I think somebody may have done that, or I heard somebody tell them, well, I know as an angler.
They're always from out of state too.
Oh yeah.
People from South Carolina coming up here. And
as an angler, like I went out with Chris the other day, and we caught 21 fish, and I brought home 21 fish to clean, and I don't know of very many times that I would take that many fish to come and clean, because I was cleaning fish for an hour. Like, I don't want to clean that many. And I think a lot of people, there might be somebody somewhere that's bringing home 100 fish off Fire Rock to clean them, but I doubt if that's like the norm. And even if you averaged it out, I don't have the data to support it, I guess, but I would say it's probably not this vast exploitation of the resource that people think.
And a lot of our regulations are more to make anglers feel better, so they like a bag limit, just so you know that somebody's not keeping a cooler. But like I mentioned before, we manage for the whole population. So personally, if somebody keeps a whole cooler full of 100 fish, it doesn't matter to me. I just look at what the data tells me the next time I'm there, and as long as they're reproducing and growing great, and we're catching decent amounts of fish, and anglers are not complaining, I'm happy.
Did you hear about the game warden fishing tournament last spring?
I know of it, but not anything funny that happened.
Oh, it was pretty funny.
Well, you got to tell me. Did they stink it up or something? Or
no, well, one of the guys contacted me the year before and was like, "Hey, Chris, I want you to come fish the High Rock tournament, the High Rock wildlife tournament." And I said, "Well, yeah, I'll fish it with you."
I didn't even know they had such a thing.
Yeah, they've been doing it 5 years.
Yeah,
really.
So he called me. I show up. I'm at the house on High Rock, and all the game wardens are in there from all over the state.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was a couple guys in there I knew really close, and I was like, man, I don't know how this is gonna work out. And we get out there and we get fishing on day one. My 10 fish go, I think it was 18 and a half, 19 pounds. My 10 fish.
Ooh, wow, that's good.
And second place had like 8 pounds, and I was like, oh no, what have we done? I'm like, oh God, they're never gonna have me back. But
you're supposed to sandbag.
I know.
In racing.
Well,
Don't show them what all you got.
I know. Well, here's what we did on day 2. I didn't even fish.
No,
I just used the net.
Just did the net.
But it was fun, and we had a good time. So it was neat.
Yeah, I think that about covers it for me. I think maybe we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Well, I'm gonna tell you, it's been a privilege to get these two guys in the same room and to talk about crappie. And of course, a lot of this was in light of our video that we recorded. Going out and catching the big crappies, and I think all of us discovered some new and exciting things we didn't know before. And even if we didn't, sort of put to rest every sort of question we have, we did get some really good data that suggests that some good things are happening, and definitely some food for thought. As we go out and catch fish, and whether we want to release them or not, I think at least we've got something to kind of go on, even if it's not like a full-blown study. So appreciate you guys. Appreciate Chris, you taking me out fishing and catching these fish. That was a lot of fun. I also appreciate you, Troy, coming and showing us how to take out the Otolith, like what we're looking for, and then also just kind of walking us through like what does it mean. So I think this has been it's been a lot of fun. So appreciate you guys.
No, you're welcome.
So,
Well, thank you, and I appreciate you having me. This was very fun.
Well, good.
I enjoyed talking to both of y'all,
Yeah.
getting angler perspectives. So.
Well, my goal is to get you on the boat now, Troy. So I'd like to see you.
Yeah, I think
Catch
we
a
can.
couple crappies.
We can probably work something out.
Work something out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, again, if you're watching this, don't forget to like and subscribe. And again, since it's a collaboration with these two guys, I'm sure if you have questions for either one of them, Troy, we've got his contact information. If you have biology questions, he is more than willing to answer those. Whether that's over the phone or whatever, or email. And he's been very helpful in the past and also today. Chris Miller, obviously, great angler. Also owns and operates Mill Rock Crappie Guides. And so if you want to go out and hammer some big old slabs, put some pigs in the boat like what we did the other day, you certainly reach out to Chris, and we'll have his contact information as well. So again, we appreciate you watching, appreciate you hanging out with us, and we'll see what we come up with for next time.